Imagine you're at a UK airport heading off on holiday when a police officer pulls you aside. They start asking about your travel plans, your background, and then they ask for your phone password. You've seen the movies, so you decide to stay silent. You think, I have the right to remain silent. But here is the reality. In that specific moment, under Schedule 7 of the Terrorism Act 2000, your right to silence effectively doesn't exist. You have a legal duty to answer their questions and provide that password. If you don't, you aren't just being difficult, you're committing a crime that can lead to years in prison. We're taught that the law is a shield, but in the UK, silence can sometimes be the very thing that helps the prosecution build a case against you. There is a massive misconception that no comment is a safe harbor for anyone under investigation. We've all heard the caution, you do not have to say anything. Many people stop listening right there, believing that silence is a neutral act. But the law, specifically Section 34 of the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act 1994, added a sting to the tail of that right. The caution continues, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. This is what's known as an adverse inference. It means that if you stay silent at the police station, but then show up at your trial with a perfect alibi, the jury is allowed to ask a very pointed question. If this person is innocent, why didn't they mention this alibi when they were first questioned? The court can then infer that you stayed silent because you needed time to fabricate a story. Silence in a police interview isn't just a void. It's an evidential gap that a judge or jury can fill with their own conclusions about your guilt. The stakes for getting this wrong are incredibly high, and the courts have shown they won't always protect you just because you followed a lawyer's instructions. Take the landmark case of R.V. Howell. In this instance, a defendant genuinely relied on their solicitor's advice to remain silent during a police interview. Most people would assume that relying on legal advice is a valid reason to stay quiet. However, the Court of Appeal ruled that even if you genuinely follow your lawyer, a jury can still draw an adverse inference if they decide your reliance on that advice wasn't reasonable in the circumstances. In short, your lawyer isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. Then, look at the physical reality of our borders. In June 2023, a 24-year-old man was sentenced to 6 years in prison after a Schedule 7 stop at Stansted Airport led to an investigation into his digital materials. Another man in August 2023 was jailed for 3 years after a similar stop at Gatwick revealed he had breached his license conditions. These aren't just hypothetical risks. These are years of someone's life signed away because they were caught in the unique legal net of a border examination. But what if you aren't at an airport? What if you're just driving or walking down the street? This is where the secret knowledge of the law can completely change the dynamic of a police encounter. If a police officer stops you on the street, it's often a stop-and-account encounter. In this situation, the judge in the case of Thames Valley Police and Hepburn 2002 famously stated that nobody is required in this country to satisfy a police officer that he or she is not committing an offence. Unless the officer is using a specific legal power to detain you, you generally have the legal right to walk away and refuse to answer. The most effective thing you can do is politely ask, am I being detained and under what legal power? If they can't name a power, they can't force you to stay. If you're driving and don't have your license, don't panic. You can request a HORT1 form, often called a producer, which gives you 7 days to take your documents to a police station of your choice. And under Pace Code A, you are legally entitled to a written receipt of a stop or search, or at the very least, the officer's details. These small procedural rules are the only thing that separates a voluntary conversation from a legal detention. This leads to a critical warning for both sides of the interview table. For the person being questioned, there is a dangerous disclosure gap. In the case of R.V. Imran and Hussein, the Court of Appeal held that police have no legal obligation to disclose their evidence to you or your solicitor before an interview starts. They only have a duty not actively to mislead. This means you could be sitting there saying, "No comment," while the police are holding a video of the crime that you don't even know exists. By the time they reveal it in the interview, your silence might have already done the damage. However, the warning for the police and the system is just as sharp. If a suspect has a genuine reason for silence, such as their age, mental capacity, or state of health, courts must consider these urgent factors before allowing an adverse inference. And while you might think giving a fake name is a small lie to avoid a ticket, it can be charged as perverting the course of justice, an offence that technically carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment because it strikes at the heart of the justice system itself. So, is the right to silence a shield for the innocent or a trap for the unwary? The law in the UK has moved away from the idea of absolute silence toward a system where you are expected to defend yourself the moment you are questioned. The key lessons are clear. Know when you are truly detained. Always ask for a solicitor because their presence can cure procedural breaches, and never ever provide false information. Silence is no longer a simple right. It is a tactical decision with potentially life-altering consequences. This video is intended for informational purposes and is not legal advice. If you find yourself facing these issues, you should speak to a solicitor or contact Citizens Advice immediately. Thanks for watching The Law Desk. If you found this helpful, subscribe for a new video and leave any questions in the comments. See you next time.